Welcome to the Flash Finds podcast, the world's fastest podcast where we explore how Facebook can help you with the stuff you're into. I'm Emma Rogue, joined by Nathan the Cat Lady, a Facebook creator. So Nathan, if you're into pets, what kind of stuff can you find on Facebook?
Well, I make reels about useful tips for pet owners. For instance, cats don't like still water, so all of my cats have cat fountains.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute. What a great episode. See you next time on the Flash Finds podcast, all about discovering the stuff on Facebook you care about. Bye.
Things change, but Deer Park Natural Spring Water is a constant you can count on, bringing you the essence of home for 150 years and counting. Sourced from carefully selected springs, Deer Park Natural Spring Water has naturally occurring electrolytes for a crisp, refreshing taste. Find Deer Park Natural Spring Water at your favorite local retailer today. After 150 years, there's only one thing left to say. Deer Park, that's still good water.
Everyone, welcome back to our Gold 20s podcast. We are both back today after a few weeks of solo episodes, and I'm so excited. I'm so out of practice of doing the podcast, though, because we've stayed committed to releasing an episode every week. However, it's probably been, I want to say a solid 6 weeks since we recorded together today. It's been a long time. Yeah,
it has been.
I feel like maybe our next episode or in a few weeks, we should just do a life catch-up episode because we've had so much going on in our personal lives that I feel like we can bring you guys up to speed on what's been going on in the past 6 weeks. Really exciting stuff happening for both of us. So if you want to, hear about that, check back in a few weeks because I feel like we can have a whole episode dedicated to it.
Definitely. This week's episode was actually a submission from one of you lovely listeners who DM'd us on Instagram. So that's super exciting. If you ever have an idea for an episode or even just a question you have, feel free to DM us. And so a person asked us to talk about TikTok account management, other social media tasks as a job because they were interested in that.
Yeah. And I also want to say, sorry it took us so long to record this. They probably messaged us right around the time we were getting ready to take a break from recording. But all this to say, we will get around to your guys' episode requests eventually, even if it takes us a little bit. But thank you so much for bearing with us. And we are so excited about today's episode. Both Tegan and I work in social media. However, we do pretty different things from one another. But I also wanted to plug and mention that we did a whole other episode about what it's like to work in social media back in season 2. It was season 2, episode 36. If you listen to this episode and you want to hear more, but we actually walk through a whole bunch of different areas within social media industry that you can work in. So we talk a lot about organic content and some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. And actually, I guess today's episode's really a deep dive on that side of social media. But we also talk a bit more about the paid media side of things, which is what I do full time. And then we also talk about influencers and the whole content creator thing. Content creator thing, that thing. We talk about that in a lot more detail in that episode as well. So like I said, there's more content about this topic, the whole go seek out that episode if you're wanting to hear more after this one. I was also laughing because the show notes of that episode were we're recording this episode because Emily in Paris is trash. And it's total garbage. It's not accurate. And I remember feeling so passionate about that after watching Emily in Paris. And I just recently saw that they're promoting the new season of it. So I was here we go. Another social media episode to be this is what social media actually is because Emily in Paris is trash and it's fake. And that is not accurate at all.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I only watched the first season of that show, but there's a moment where she posts a picture of a dog pooping and then it goes viral. Oh, I'm like, girl, give me a break.
Yeah. And it's just the whole concept. Okay, I could rant about this forever. It's just the whole concept of moving to another country for an American company. And then what you're doing is social media. I'm none of this makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And my biggest problem with it is I was people who are in high school and younger trying to figure out what they want to do with their life are probably watching this being like, oh, I want to work in social media because this is what I want my life to look like. And it's like, that is not the case at all. So anyways, we're going to give you guys a really good idea as to what a day in the life of a social media manager or social media freelancer looks like. High school, walk through some of like the main responsibilities. The first one, and if we just jump right into it, is what I love most about social media, and that is all around strategy. So like I said, I actually work in the paid side of social media. So the strategies I'm like forming on a day in and day out are quite different from just like freelance content and organic content. In case you guys aren't familiar with those terms, this is like content you're posting on your Instagram feed, your TikTok feed, your Facebook feed, like anything that's living on your profile and doesn't have any budget behind it, doesn't have really any media, so optimization to it at all. You're not targeting a specific audience. You're really just posting content for your followers and for new people to find you organically. So that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. But like I said, this is what I get most excited about. So what creating a content strategy looks like is creating content buckets or content pillars. I've heard them reference different things throughout my social media career, but creating content ideas that align to your brand and promote your product and or service, but also build community. So I think what's so exciting about social media is how it's so of the moment, you know, and it's so fast strategy living and so fast paced. So it's like you figure one thing out, but then the next day you log in, there's some sort of social issue or social change happening, and social media is the first thing to feel it. But all this being said, I really think social media has been feeling the change in just overall marketing and like your marketing funnel and your, you know, conversion funnel, how people buy, what and why people buy from those brands is changing. And again, I'm really seeing that happen on social media. So really focusing on a content strategy and producing content that is meaningful, not just selling products, then the next thing your services, but actually building a community is so important. But you need to be really strategic with how that comes to be. It's not just, you know, posting a picture of the product that you're selling every other day. It's tying it to more of a content strategy other.
Definitely. I feel like the biggest mistake I see in this space is posts that are too like, buy this, because you're not building a community that's not giving people motivation to follow. And I feel like now it's all about community. That I feel like is a very important thing for consumers.
Yeah, 100%. And not even just community, but focus on like content and community. And I actually found, I was just cleaning out my office yesterday and I found this paper that I do this when I get so many ideas randomly in my head. I just grab a piece of like printer paper and just start scribbling things down. So I literally have that. If you're watching this on video, this is what it looks like, but for our golden 20s. And I think this is when we were planning season 4. I had all these ideas like popping in my head for our social content. And what I wrote down was how we really need to focus on adding value to build followers and community and create engaging content, which is how we're going to expand our reach and boost like the algorithm essentially. So what I had under these two like buckets would be maybe things that turn into content series or like this can shape your content buckets, but things for adding value is like providing tips and tricks. So if you're selling a product, you know, it's like how to use it or tips and tricks, show how it's versatile, things like that. Also just providing advice or providing personal stories and, you know, being relatable to your audience. They actually take a lot of value out of that. And then for us on the podcast, obviously we have this whole long form content side of our content strategy where it's, you know, using that, showing that on social media channels, and that creates value and again, builds community versus on the engagement side of things, just how we expand reach and find new people to listen to the podcast. This is where we start posting things, especially on Instagram, that are more relatable memes or tying into pop culture and, you know, sharing behind the scenes stuff, just things that people want to share and interact with and engage with. Advice, kind of the other key content pillar of our social strategy. So I know those are more Instagram-y things, but I think they apply to TikTok as well. And I think another big part of this is using these content pillars to also create a growth strategy. So having a content strategy is part A, but then part B is how can I use this content strategy to fuel my growth, to build that community, to eventually sell my products or get podcast listeners or whatever it is. So maybe it's also layering in like a hashtag or a keyword strategy. If it's doing giveaways or even finding posts that you want to boost with a little bit of budget, anything like that, maybe using trending audios, trending sounds, especially in the TikTok space. Like, I think all of this is then taking your content strategy and evolving it to like kind of hack the growth strategy side of it as well. So you're actually reaching people with this great content that you're producing.
Yeah, definitely. I think as far as like the keyword strategy goes, for our TikTok, 90% of our views currently are coming from searches. So the way that people are using TikTok now is how I used to use Instagram and how people used to use Google, where it's like you are searching for things. So when I'm, say, looking for a restaurant to go to, I'm going on TikTok and searching Restaurant Toronto. So if you are a restaurant in Toronto, you should be posting to TikTok and using keywords in your caption and in the text so that the SEO is all aligning and I am seeing it when I search it. And so it's like, not only do you have to be, like you're saying, creating the content in those pillars, you then have to be like posting them correctly with the right strategy behind the captions and the text and the audio to then make them go even further.
It's actually funny that you said that, because I was in a TikTok, they called it their TikTok immersion day for the company I just started working for last Tuesday. And that's exactly what they said, with people are using TikTok's search function way more now. And TikTok already didn't consider themselves social media, like they consider themselves entertainment, but now they're really wanting to lean into this whole search side of it. And it's like really fast evolving on TikTok. But to your point, Tag, like this is how people are finding restaurants to go to, bars to go to, products to try, you know, on how to use products once they've bought them, things like that. But even on the paid side, they're going to really evolve like their keyword bidding and keyword strategy and stuff. So definitely keep that in mind. Use every channel similar, but has their own nuances as to how to reach people. I think TikTok is what everyone's really focused on right now, just because it is still relatively new, but it's also extremely powerful, as we know, even just from our own personal lives. But I think there's so many great Tuesday courses and blogs out there that tell you how to use each native or channel's native features to help you boost your reach and like really lean into, consider the strategy. The last thing I'll say just on the content strategy piece before we move on, again, this is my favorite part. That's why I've been so rambly on it, but is really also leaning into reporting and analytics to guide that strategy. So for us, how I got to, you know, sharing relatable memes and pop culture clips, and not even clips, maybe I guess a little bit on TikTok. Tag, you've really been seeing pop culture clips resonate on TikTok, but more just like strategies from, they're kind of like memes, I guess, but from movies and TV shows that we post on Instagram. This was all because this was content that was working the best for us on our platforms. So we were like, might as well keep doing that. Might as well do more of that. Versus posts that, you know, I would spend hours creating these little graphics on Canva just for them to get like 5 likes and like reach 20 people out of the like 3,000 followers we have on Instagram. So it's like, okay, let's stop doing that and let's do more of what people are relating to. So make sure you're spending time digging into the numbers and like looking at what's working, what's driving reach, what's driving engagement, and then building more of that into your strategy. This is my favorite.
100%. I was just in a webinar about if you see a video start to pop off, what should you do? And every single panelist was like, recreate it, reply to a comment with another video that's almost the same. Like, you've found something that's working, so keep doing it until it stops working. So it's like, if you have anything that's performing well on any of the platforms, figure out why it's performing well, and then keep doing that until it's no longer performing well. Great. I think the next thing we're going to talk about is my favorite part, which is content creation. And this is usually like the image or video assets that you are actually posting. It is also like the copywriting. So it could be like blogs and that sort of thing, or it could just be like the captions or the text that's a part of the image and video assets. And I think the biggest thing for me on content creation is to, before you start, decide the visual language of your brand, because I think every brand's going to be different depending on who you're trying to reach. So like some brands only use professional looking images, where other brands only use images that look like they could be UGC. So they're like shot on a phone vertically. And it depends on who you're trying to reach and what type of voice you want your brand to have. And then it comes down to like what colors you're going to use, what fonts you're going to use, all that good stuff.
I feel like this is the biggest frustration I have with social media, and even especially on the freelance side, is how many hats you have to wear in order to be a social media manager. Like, as someone who enjoys the content planning and the strategy, I'm like, it sucks that it's also the expectation that I can, navigate Photoshop, I can create videos, I can copyright, I can, do all these other things. So that's why I've gone to the paid side, because I don't really enjoy content creation, if I'm being honest. But I think it is important to know what you're signing up for. So like, it is the expectation that you can, be a graphic designer, a video editor, you can be talent essentially, and be like in the video, in the photo shoots. So source really great content, even if it's not original content, but UGC, I know you mentioned that tag, which is user generated content. You can source that. You can source, things that you can repost and things from your community or like accounts, stuff like that. And then, write copy to speak to it all as well. So I don't know. I feel like this is why also social media, like, people don't realize how much work it is until you're doing it. But it's like, you have to wear all those hats, and it's unfortunately expected of you. But it's also really important to have into your rates if you're a freelancer. Like, don't think it'll take you, an hour to create a content calendar, because it's actually going to take you maybe like an hour to plan it, then another hour to source content, then maybe another couple hours to create original content, then maybe another hour to copy, like do all the captions and stuff. So this is like a really big part of social media that I think is really time consuming and like the bulk of the work. Don't want to kind of shout that out. Again, this is what Emily in Paris does not show very well. How much work it is.
Yeah. No, I do feel like content creation, at least for me, is the most time consuming as well, where with a lot of stuff, you could work on it forever. Like, I could work on a TikTok for 5 minutes, for half an hour, for 8 hours, for 16 hours. Like, you can just keep going and going depending on how you want it to look. And especially if you're a freelancer, if you have a client that has a very particular vision, it can become super time consuming. And then if the content's not performing well, there's a very low like return on investment. I've worked on TikToks that took like 6 hours and got 200 views. And it's like, that was a huge waste of everyone's time. But it's like the balance of figuring out, because you also want your content to look good and professional and not like you made it in 5 minutes. But then you also don't want to spend 6 hours on it. So it all kind of comes back to, I think, like the visual language of your brand. If it looks professional and has to take that long to edit, maybe that means you can only post 1 TikTok a week. And that's life. Like, it's all about balance and how much time you have available.
Totally. Tag, this is like a off script question that we didn't plan for, but since you love content creation so much, and since we're so focused on like providing actionable tips and, advice for people, I thought I would ask you, since you love content creation so much, what are your favorite content creation apps and tools, like things you're constantly going to when it's editing photos, videos, maybe even like copywriting, whatever it is?
Yeah. This is controversial, but I'm going to say it right now. I love AI.
is controversial.
Yeah, I know. I do like ChatGPT. So I use that, but only for idea generation and brainstorming, not for actual content creation.
Yeah, and copywriting. I'm going to tell you guys, you can always tell. You can maybe use it for like, to get the process started, but you need to go in with that human touch, regardless if it's content, copy, anything. But that's so funny. Definitely. Yeah, you came out of the gates hot on that one. I was not expecting that. Yeah.
So, I don't believe that AI is going to be taking our jobs yet, because I use AI a lot and see how garbage it is. So I'm just using it to my advantage right now. And for our TikToks, I mainly use Premiere Pro, which is very expensive and very difficult to learn. So I understand that if you are someone who's never used it before and is listening, if you go and try it, you'll be like, what the hell was this girl talking about? But for me, it's very easy. I use it to edit our podcast. I use the built-in AI to remove all ums and pauses automatically. And I also use it to make all of our vertical clips. It makes all our captions automatically, that sort of thing. I also we record on Riverside, which uses AI to create clips. So I've been using that and then kind of like A/B testing what performs better. Spoiler alert, it's the Premiere clips, but we're still testing it out. Who knows? But so those are kind of like the biggest things that I use for video content. I do also use CapCut sometimes. If I'm editing something using phone videos, I'm editing on my phone using CapCut. If I'm using non-phone videos, I'm editing on my computer. And then as far as images go, sometimes Photoshop, but for the most time, Canva. I don't really love Canva. I'm like, don't use it enough to find it like intuitive. I'm always like clicking the wrong thing and then being like, what the hell? Or like I'm dragging the wrong layer. So I don't create that much using it. But if I need to do something quick or like a graphic, especially, I'm using Canva more than the Adobe ones, just because I find that they're like too intense for social media.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I think that's actually a second really hot take is you don't like Canva.
Yeah, I know.
I love Canva, and a lot of social media girlies love Canva because first of all, you can get free. You don't have to pay for Canva. If you do pay, it's pretty cheap. I think I pay $13.99 Canadian a month, which is very cheap for how much I use it. Like pretty much all of our social content for the podcast is done on Canva because I just love it so much. The templates are so good. You can even use it in your personal life. I'm like defending Canva right now, but I've used it in my personal life for like resume templates, for bachelorette itineraries, like Tegan actually did your wedding itinerary, but like day of events for your wedding day and stuff on Canva. So you can find so many things for both professional and personal life on Canva, but I love Canva so much. I also wanted to shout out Temply. That's the video editing app I use for TikTok, like you said, phone videos. They have really great templates that you can just upload your own videos to. They have really like nice text options. They have royalty-free music that you can like add to your videos and stuff. Again, you have to pay for it. And I think it's fairly pricey, but if you actually use it a lot, it's worthwhile. I really, really like Temply as well. So just wanted to slide that in there. I'm not a CapCut girly, but a Temply girly.
I've never tried Temply. I have tried a few others, but for the most part, I use CapCut. I find that CapCut's the most robust, so that's why I tend to use it. It can be pricey. I usually, if I'm having like a problem with a video, will like pay for a month, use the tools to fix it, and then be like, that's me set. So like they have a really good audio cleanup using AI again. So like if you record a phone video that's really noisy, it does a really, really good job of cleaning it up. Things like that. Stabilizers are pretty good in it. So that would only be if I did my content capturing badly, which happens a lot.
That's funny. Okay, cool. Well, hopefully that gave some people some ideas of what tools to use, but there's really so many. And I think it's just finding what works for you. Oh, and the other thing, sorry, I was going to say on the whole Adobe programs, they are extremely intimidating, but I feel like if you know one, you can kind of figure out the others fairly easily. Illustrator is the one outlier for me where I'm like, I'm too much of a Photoshop girly to understand how Illustrator works. But that being said, for like our solo episodes, exactly what you just said, Tag, any solo episodes I do on my own where I edit it too, I download, to shout out even what it is. It might be Premiere or something. I think it's one of the video ones from Adobe. I'll download it just for the day, pretty much, edit the podcast, save it, and then I'll cancel my subscription. So I don't even really get charged for it. But I'm like, just because I understand the Adobe lingo, I feel like I can kind of figure this out. Definitely not a pro by any means. And it takes me way longer than it would take Tegan, who's like very well versed in this. But all this to be said, it might be worthwhile. Like if you really want to get into content creation, if it's video, photos, like even like graphic design, like maybe take an Adobe course or something, like use Skillshare or something to like brush up on your Adobe skills. And I wish this was the moment where I was like, this episode's actually sponsored by Skillshare. It's not, but I think it's so many resources out there to help you is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, definitely. I think I wanted to second that. If you want to work in content creation, even just like download the apps on like a 1 month free trial and play around with them, because I use Adobe every day. That's part of my job, and I'm self-taught, and most of the people I work with are. So these are just like nerds who were like, I'm going to download it and try it out, and here we are getting paid for it. So highly recommend if you are interested. Who knows what can happen, especially in the future. Like maybe I'll be surrounded by people who are like CapCut experts in 5 years. So get started now. Get practicing.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, moving on from content creation. Sorry, I probably dragged that out way longer than it needs to be, but I was just curious. Sorry, I was gonna is community management. And this is my second least favorite thing about organic social media. Again, it can be extremely time consuming. So what community management is replying to DMs, replying to comments, interacting with your community, interacting with like accounts, your followers, that sort of thing. While I say I don't really like it, I know how extremely valuable this is. And this is what social media is made for, is two-way communication between you and someone else. When you think about social media, like Facebook, for instance, it was built off, you keeping in touch with your friends and family. Now it's brands keeping in touch with their customers, or influencers keeping in touch with their followers, or other brands or other influencers. We just talked so much about how important community is for your content strategy and just your overall social media strategy. But this is the core part of it. So really, really important. I don't know if people love doing this. And to be honest, I actually could see people who are like really bubbly and have a like quirky personality really thriving in this. But this is like so important. Like brush up, definitely something that, again, I don't think people understand how time consuming it is. It's like this important it is. To be honest, we could do probably a better job of this for the podcast, but we're just like, okay, we're just trying to create the content and get it out. But this is honestly one of the best ways to grow and build that community is by interacting with your community.
Things change, but Deer Park Natural Spring Water is a constant you can count on, bringing you the essence of home for 150 years and counting. Sourced from carefully selected springs, Deer Park Natural Spring Water has naturally occurring electrolytes for a crisp, refreshing taste. Find Deer Park Natural Spring Water at your favorite local retailer today. After 150 years, there's only one thing left to say. Deer Park, that's still good water.
Yep. I totally agree. I feel like a lot of the big brands on TikTok who like blew up on TikTok were killing it in community management. Like it's like every funny viral video, you'll see like Duolingo and McDonald's in the comments. And it's my problem with community management is one, I find it more embarrassing than actually posting content, which makes no sense because it's like, you're putting yourself less out there when you're commenting. But anyways, that's my own problem.
It's because it's the two-way communication. When you're putting out content, that's one way, right? So it's like, I'm putting this out there and then I'm blocking out how it's received. versus community management. You're like, no, I'm interacting with the trolls. I'm interacting with people who are shitting on me. And that is a much harder thing to do. So that's totally valid.
That's true. I also find with community management, you can always do more. And this is the thing that I struggle with clients is they think that community management takes no time at all.
Yeah.
It's actually very time consuming. And a lot of what my community management is, the client doesn't see because it's like hiding or deleting terrible, terrible comments. And
but
so it's like you could always be doing more. But like I was saying, the return on investment doesn't make sense to spend 6 hours of your 8-hour day doing community management. No. But then it's like, how do you balance it? I do find that it can be quite draining as well. A lot of my clients are not white and not men, and their comments are horrific. I did a campaign for a show that had Jewish people, and we had Nazis in the comments every day. I'm doing some community management for an Indigenous show right now. You can just imagine what the people have to say about that. So that's something to keep in mind too, when, especially if you're working in those types of communities, people are awful. So it's like sometimes you just have to only spend a limited amount of time for your own mental health. So it's like, I'm going to spend my hour today deleting all the racist comments, and that will be my community management for today. And that just has to be okay, because it can be crazy out there.
Yeah. And I think it's like all these idealisms are more radical, more so than ever before, like very extremist, and people take to social media since, you know, they have that screen between them and the person that they're commenting these really awful things on. So it like builds up their confidence to actually make these awful and stuff like that. But I think that's a great point. And actually, when you were talking, it made me think that depending on the size of business that you're doing this for, if you're freelancing, this maybe isn't so much the case, or if you're working for small businesses and like startups or something. But in my world, where I've worked with a lot more like corporate companies, it's often like forming really close relationships with PR and legal on community management. So you know what you are able to say, how to handle situations, because the last thing you want is to further fuel a fire. So that is definitely really important to learn in community management. And just going back to the whole tools side of things, resources, I think another big part of this, the word, if you will, is social listening. So there's social listening tools out there. Those like tools to help you. Actually, no, I guess they would be social listening tools to like interact with people across different channels in one solid place. Again, these are often like things you need to pay for, but it could be something worthwhile looking into if community management is a big part of your or your job. So this is things I'm trying to even remember. I think Sprinkler is one of them. It was one that I've used in the past for scheduling content, but also social listening and community management. And all of that just kind of helps you keep a pulse on the overall sentiment of your content, the comments, you know, if people are liking, disliking, commenting racist things or commenting really positive things, you know, but this could be a really great way to keep your pulse on community management.
Yeah, I did want to say as like one final tip that I never recommend people actually delete comments. I will do that if it's something like
hate speech,
racism, hate speech.
Yeah.
But if it's a critique of something, I will very, very rarely delete comments, because that makes people so much angrier. Probably like 2 to 3 times a year at my work, we get hired by a company who is hiring us for damage control because they deleted comments. Because then it becomes a whole campaign of people being like, oh, they're not listening, they're trying to silence us. And it motivates more hate. So I just wanted to mention that, because I said I delete comments, but only when they're racist, not if it's an actual complaint. You can verify, because a lot of our TikToks still have lots and lots of hate comments that are loud and proud up there.
That's funny, but good call. And that's it. Like, that's why you need to work with PR and legal to like differentiate, you know, what's free speech, what's hate speech, what's, you know, allowed, what's not allowed, what are my boundaries, what are, you know, it's very convoluted, but If it's handled well, I will say community management, like you were saying, some brands on TikTok, like just going off in comments of like totally unrelated videos. This makes people like this solidifies brand love. You know, if there's good community management, people will follow you, buy from you solely based off of that. So we're mentioning all the really bad and ugly sides of community management, but there is a lot of really positive sides when it's done well. We manage the whole tool. And then the last like big area of responsibility that we're going to talk about before we just get into some like rapid fire last minute tips for you guys there, just talk about partnerships. So this could look like partnering with content creators or even other brands, and how this can be a pillar in your content strategy or maybe help pay for content creation side of things, everything that we were just talking about. But I do think, again, this is another responsibility that often falls under a social media manager's day-to-day tasks on top of everything that we were just talking about. So just wanted to mention it. Again, working in like bigger corporate clients, usually this is handled by like a PR agency or a PR department, but I think it is common for influencers and that whole side of social media to be lumped in with community management, content creation, and all of that.
Yeah, totally. I've actually never worked with influencers. I've only ever worked with talent if we were promoting a TV show, which is kind of similar, but also kind of different. So,
yeah. And I would say too, there's a difference between influencers and content creators. Yeah. And this is maybe like a weird thing, and I don't need to even get into the specifics, but I think there's like like some of the like key responsibilities in this area of social media tasks is like creating contracts, getting them product, following up on timelines in terms of, you know, if there's creative reviews and approvals for content prior to them posting it on their channels, making sure you get that content for that approval time, then following up with them to make sure they're posting on time. So this is more for like influencer side of things, but content creators, they're maybe just creating content that will live on your brand or services social feeds and not on their own. Not paying them for their reach and their engagement. You're just paying for the content. So maybe this is, you know, you still need to get contracts signed. You need to get them product or, you know, hook them up with your service. Good to coordinate that. You still have to do like creative reviews and approvals, getting content, things like that. So yeah, that's just a little bit more detail, I guess, into what this actually looks like in day-to-day tasks.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, let's just go through some last tips to wrap up this episode. I think the first and biggest one for me, we've talked so much throughout this episode about how much work it is to work in social media and how you have to wear so many hats. So my first tip is to batch your time. And this can look like a couple different ways. However, what it looks like is the opposite of, oh, I need to post on social media today. What am I going to post? It's like sitting down for a couple hours and brainstorming your content strategy and brainstorming your growth strategy in terms of what hashtags and keywords you want to use. So doing all of that at once rather than post by post. And then it's sitting down and actually, you know, creating a content calendar, filling it out. Maybe you do this once a month, maybe you do it once a week. Like it can look like whatever it looks like to you. But again, it's avoiding having to think of a post and create it and post it all in that same moment. Again, being this freelance or as a full-time job, it could also be, you know, splitting it up by days. And I've heard this tip a lot where it's like Tuesdays are my email or Monday's my email day. Tuesday's my content creation day where I'm just, you know, creating a whole bunch of content. Wednesday is my whatever day. Like maybe it's when you start planning your content for the next week. So you can really figure out how to batch your time and what that actually looks like. But I just recommend you do it in however feels right to you. I think even on community management, like when I was doing freelance social work, it was community management was in my contract. So I had 3 times a day where I would sit down for an hour or half an hour to do community management. So like every day at lunch, every day at 5 p.m. So it wasn't like, oh, I have my notifications on. I saw we got a comment. I have to go reply to that comment right now. Like you're going to waste so much time if you do it that way. So just batch your time for every task that we've talked about so far.
100%. I think a big thing for me that saves a lot of time is using templates when possible. And this, I don't just mean like social media templates, although that's part of it. I mean like your content calendar, have a template for that. Don't make that from scratch every week or every month. Your reports, they can be super, super time consuming. So it's like come up with a template and then use that report for every single client. And then when it comes to your social strategy, when we were talking about the visual language of your brand, you can have set templates. That's like, if we are posting memes, this is like the font I'm using. This is the colors I'm using, whatever it might be, so that it's not like you said, you're like, okay, I need to come up with content and I'm staring at a blank square on Canva. What do? You're like, okay, well, let's take a look at my pillars and I have a template for each pillar and we can go from there.
Approval, I think kind of similar to templates, but using resources and tools to help you is my next tip. So we've mentioned a few of them on the content creation and community management side, but you can also use tools to schedule your content or to, like we're saying, like code management tools to see what's trending, what other people are liking, what people are saying in your community. There's a tool for anything. So I think, again, we mentioned some of our favorites. I will first Canva again. I love Canva. This can using tools like Later. That's really big for scheduling content, but also for like finding hashtags and, other parts of the content strategy. But all this to say, use tools to make your life more efficient. And we won't judge you if they're AI driven.
Exactly. I think one, or I guess 2 points that I wanted to bring up was something you mentioned is silencing your notifications, because as soon as you start working in social media, especially if things are going well, your phone will be going off constantly and it's so distracting. So turn off your notifications so that you can only look at them when you have the time set aside to do it properly. And then you won't be wasting your time. The other thing is, if you are working with clients directly, to be transparent about how frequently you will be doing community management. Because I find a lot of clients, especially if they're not versed in social media, think that it should be instantaneous, and that is not realistic. So sometimes I like to explain that, like, I will be doing community management once a day or twice a day or whatever it is, so that they don't have to be like, I saw we got this comment about this. Are we going to respond to that? You'll be like, yep, they know that I am because we already talked about it. So be as transparent as possible, because a lot of people genuinely just do not understand social media at all. And their questions can be like silly and annoying, but it's just because they don't know.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like setting expectations also with your clients, like this is what I'm doing when, how much I'll be doing it. And then again, we've mentioned this, but also just making sure you're charging appropriately, especially if you do this freelance. Like, do not undersell yourself or like, play other people's games. How much time this takes you, so make sure you're charging people accordingly.
Yep, definitely. My last tip was, again, comments related, and it's just to not take comments personally. This is something that I struggled with because I'm a people pleaser. I'm very sensitive. So then it's like any comment that's a critique, I'm like, oh my God, this is a critique on me because I'm the worst. Where it's like, no, people are just angry. I find especially on ads, I think people are just mad in general that they're getting served ads, and people are just crazy out there. So sometimes you just have to be like, okay, it's nothing to do with me. It's whatever, and call it a day. But again, having notifications off helps so that you're not seeing mean comments every time you look at your phone.
100%.
Great. Was that everything?
Yep. I think so. Again, I could talk about this all day, but I'm like, no, we need to wrap it up. We could do a part 2. Yeah. And again, I'm going to plug that other episode that we did, season 2, episode 36, because again, if you were like, this was exactly what I'm looking for, but for paid or for influencers, go listen to that episode, because we deep dive into the other areas of the social media industry. So we think you'll really like that episode if you liked this one.
Totally. We also have an episode that's about our like career paths. If you're like, how do you get a job in social media? So that's another good one if you are considering that. We talk about like the schools we went to, the jobs we've had, and all that sort of thing as well. Like, in the meantime, I think this is where we'll end this episode. We put out new episodes every Tuesday, so make sure you're subscribed and following us so you see when those new episodes drop. They also drop a day early on our Patreon, and those episodes are ad-free. So if you listen every week and are tired of hearing about how good Verbo is, maybe check out our Patreon. It's $2 a month, and then you can listen to them all ad-free there. We are, of course, on social media at our Golden 20s on pretty much all the platforms. You can check out our sick social strategy and see everything we're talking about. Let us know what you think. And like we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, feel free to message us at any time. Sometimes people like message us just to say hi. Sometimes people message us for like very specific advice and we'll just like DM them an answer. Or if you have any kind of episode suggestions, we are very open to that. We love to chat about the things that you want to actually hear about. So definitely reach out to us on any of the platforms. I think that's everything for this week. So thanks for listening.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye.